My name's Askew. I'm an environmental researcher and film producer and director. I'm the founder of Earth Minutes, and I wanted to discuss our recent project, Project RENU, which is in collaboration with Durham University, and it stands for Research Expedition for Net Zero and Universal Learning. So if you click onto the next slide, it gives you a little bit of background of what this collaboration is, but I am an alumni student of Durham University. I studied a geography BSc, graduating in 2018, and we really wanted to utilise the opportunity for collaboration, especially of last year with the pandemic, to address field trips, especially because I am very much specified in environmental research and scientific communication. So to collaborate on this behalf was just a very interesting opportunity, and the Enhancing Accessibility Fund came an option last year also, which was exactly why and how this project happened. So if you could go on to the next slide of why we're doing this project. The whole aim of this project was to really address how we could come up with a really achievable and actionable solution for academic leaders and institutions. This is mainly in making field trips more accessible, so that's physically as well as financially more accessible for students. And then the sustainability element, which is very much on the top of students' lists at the moment with carbon footprints, especially related to travel of field trips. So if we could go on to the next slide of the mission. With this, what we actually did was we produced a digital field trip experience. This was very much related to the second year module Glaciers and Glaciation within the Geography BSc degree. So this is quite a specific module that we addressed and worked with. But the two main aims of the entire project was, number one, to make it more accessible to all students, and number two, to make sure that that students will be provided with sufficient tools to learn about the environment in a fundamentally sustainable way. So going on to who did this on the next slide, we had two teams, two main teams. One of them was Durham University, which was more the academic and research team. And then the second team was Earth Minutes, which we kind of provided more so the production element of it. And as much as the teams overlapped, for example, the lecturers actually doubled up as the presenters. But the main focus was actually the student involvement. So this particular project was for students and led by students. That's how we found that it was going to be most effective in addressing this subject. So going on to how we approached it on the next slide, there's a two-stage approach. So firstly, we made the digital field trip experience. We filmed this in April and we produced it over the summer. I will go into a little bit more detail about what that looked like and also kind of how we approached it from structure as well as design. And then the second approach was the research report. So we really want to stress that with any sort of investigation like this, we do not want to eliminate all field trips. It's not the intention. We only want to work out the opportunistic alternatives, see if there's a way that we can use this creative communication in a more engaging and effective way. But with that, we really wanted to trial it and test it. So our research report will really quantify the effectiveness of learning, accessibility and inclusivity, as well as sustainability. So we wanted to make sure that it's fully trialed and tested, as well as it's perfect for gauging some development process of what students, as well as the lecturers, feel about it and how it worked for them. So going on to the next slide, there is this is the platform that we built. We ended up actually going for a really interactive platform. From our kind of preliminary research with the students, we found out very quickly that it wasn't going to be effective just to build a short film for them to sit down and watch. We needed something a bit more interactive, more so block by block learning. And in a field trip, particularly with this Glaciers and Glaciation field trip within Durham Uni, you get taken to each site and then there's a short presentation, there's a short kind of guided discussion through each site. So that's exactly how we've presented the field trip in this way. We wanted it to be block by block. We wanted it to be also including different mediums. So as you can see, the site 1, 2 and 3 they're the main short films that were involved. And then we've also included 360 video content, different kind of articles and graphics as well. So on the next slide, I'm hoping that it's playing a video, but if it's not,
yes, it is.
Okay, great. So with this video, this kind of leads on to our innovative and creative approach. We really wanted to use this as an opportunity to communicate science in a really updated and refreshing way. We found out also that rather than touching just on animation, that using this mixed media design, so with real drone cinematography, as well as this kind of scientific motion graphic on top, we would be able to really provide this visual translation of the landscape, and that particular style and element of interactivity worked really well, mainly because it also provided an option for the students, or even an experience for the students that they couldn't get in the field. So adding an opportunistic element to each kind of step of how we were visually communicating it and exploring this field trip was definitely more of an effective way to go about it. Then if you go on to the next slide, this is going into a bit more of the research, what we found out so far. And I think this could be of interest, especially for this conference, because as much as we're addressing kind of the broader use as well as application of a field trip, fieldwork definitely sits in field trips as a particularly important aspect. And in this glacier and glaciology field trip, there's not direct fieldwork that takes place. So I'll share my findings and then I'll kind of connect the dots at the very end. But so far with our student focus groups, this was very much just a conversation with the students involved in the module themselves. And the two main learnings we found were that quite a significant proportion of students do not feel that field trips are currently inclusive to all. And then secondly, it was only about half of the student group that considered carbon footprints of their field trips, both local and abroad. So as much as this is a very, very topical conversation on both accessibility and sustainability, the conversations are happening. It's starting to be approached in institutions, but still in terms of student involvement and their engagement surrounding these issues is low. So going on to the next slide, this is the kind of main aims of our research report, in which will be released in December. So we're very much still undertaking the data sector of it. But at first, we're kind of addressing the student learning and the impact on the effectiveness of learning, as well as student accessibility. And then we'll go into evaluate and estimate the impact on carbon footprint and, importantly, the economic impact. This is a particularly important one at the end there, because creating something really cinematic and impressive on a creative level is great, but if it can't be made achievable or affordable for other university use, then that is just not going to be effective. So we really wanted to make sure that we were producing something that's cost effective, and also that's ultimately going to be for wider use across the nation as well as internationally as well. So the next element of it is the wider implications. So we wanted to use this particular research opportunity to really amplify the voices of other people within this space of work. So we actually partnered with two different organisations. Firstly, Back Geographers, which are a fantastic student-led organisation, and they really wanted to voice the importance of the connection between accessibility and inclusivity, particularly within race. Then we went on to work with Teach the Future, which is a UK-based campaign, again, led by students. And they really wanted to take our research that one step further to push, to push really onto how we can extend this beyond just the geography department, which is, again, really important to see if this can actually have wider use. So just the last 2 points on social impact. This element of the project we felt was really unique to our research as well as our wider project, just due to the kind of public engagement surrounding it. Importantly, we worked with social media creators. Some of them are on here. John Derting, who's a filmmaker based in Alaska, provided some footage for our films, as well as we had some GIFs, which are stickers that can be shared easily, social media. and involving different social media influencers as well as the broader kind of creators on that space meant that our amplification of the conversation was very much driven beyond academia. So lastly, these are the kind of main conclusions that we've had so far. Unfortunately, we haven't got any specific quantitative data yet. That is very much to come in October. We're partnering with an NUS survey that will be going out to 10,000 students across the UK, very much just to gauge the student opinion on this conversation. And just to highlight the kind of main learning is that there's an opportunity here where we could scale this with a hybrid approach. A lot of students really enjoy the digital field trip experience, but obviously we cannot just eliminate fieldwork. So potentially working into the opportunities of local fieldwork, even in the premise of university. A lot of students who were based on, for example, a trip going to Portugal, doing coring, felt that that was unnecessary and they could do that in a more local environment. And again, there can be provisions then provided for accessibility options there. So that was the kind of main takeaway so far, and we can't unfortunately share much more in terms of data, but I think that kind of wraps it up as a nutshell of what we're doing, and I'd love to kind of get involved in more so of this conversation with others.
Brilliant. Excellent. Emma, thank you very much indeed. We'll maybe just stop you at that. You can see the applause is cracking away there, and there's quite a few comments and stuff in the chat as well. So please do have a look in there. But we'll bring you back at the end of the set here, and we'll hopefully get a few questions in as well. Okay. So thanks very much, Emma, for that. Excellent, and thank you for soldiering on in spite of not being able to see the slides in the same as everyone else. Wonderful. So the second presentation, get myself set up here. Sonja, lovely. You're online already there. One all set, good to go. Now, Sonja, are you bringing up your slides at your end, or have we got them for you here?
I'm going to try. I'm going to try and bring them up.
You got them. Oh, excellent. Thank you so much. Excellent. So they're coming through clear, Sonja. I'm going to pass over to you. What I'll do is I'll switch off my camera for the first 9 minutes, and then I'll just switch it on for the last minute or so, just to let you know when you're reaching your 10 minutes. Is that okay?
Great.
Lovely. Over to you, Sonja. Thank you now.
Well, good morning, everyone, and thank you for the opportunity to discuss geography fieldwork teaching in secure environments. I'm a geography lecturer and staff tutor at the OU. For the Open University, teaching in secure environments are for those students who are incarcerated or on parole or out on licence. The first OU prison graduate was back in 1974 from Wakefield Prison. The OU has a contract with the Ministry of Justice to offer many of our modules to students in such environments. The geography modules on our 2 degree programmes are actually on the list. Over the next 10 minutes, I'll set out the general challenges for these students to study in secure environments, with a particular focus on some of them during COVID, how we address inclusivity to share for our teaching, in particular fieldwork, what our fieldwork looks like, or at least a little bit of it, discuss the issues for geography fieldwork learning in such a context, and also celebrate success. There are many challenges to learning in secure environments, which have been more challenged during COVID-19. Generally, no one secure institution is the same as another. The work communication goes through education officers, and these may work across more than one prison, and of course change, as well as having many students. The education officer is for all students and not just those from the OU. Students, as well as being able to lose education rights, they can also be moved institution, and actually their work doesn't always follow them, so they can't complete their modules or the degrees. There needs to be, I think, a minimum of 6 years on a sentence to undertake an OU degree, or even an OU module. Not many of our students have restricted laptops or access to what we call the restricted internet, or what we call actually the walled garden internet, which I think is a really nice term. A lack of access to laptops during the pandemic, or any sort of computer has been a problem during the pandemic, because they've been in their cells for 23 hours. So many of our students have actually handwritten their assignments during the COVID pandemic. And even some of them didn't receive their learning materials until 2, 3, 4 months after the modules started. So despite those problems of teaching in such environments, what do we do around inclusivity? Whether it's the pandemic or not, the restricted access to online material in an online format is a challenge. All the amazing examples we have seen so far this week would have to be adapted for our students in secure environments. With the OU being a distance education provider, our geography fieldwork is already asynchronous. This can be through interactive maps, videos bringing the field sites to life, videoed interviews, images, all sorts of things, with students using the virtual learning environment to respond to questions on the materials, search on external web for additional material, and interact with students through their online forum, which is the equivalent of a blog. However, when we're producing our modules, it is a requirement that we think about what we're producing for our students in secure environments. We have to adjust our material for students in secure environments, as we do for all inclusive practice, to meet EDI as we go along. For geography fieldwork, we will provide print material, which includes screenshots as interactive maps as they drill down to the specific locations. We'll include the images, and their tutors will, through their one-to-ones, which is often on the telephone, although these haven't necessarily all been possible through the pandemic, bring the material alive, make it relatable and accessible to the student, and discuss it in sort of that spatial dimension. We had a student who had been a farmer and the fieldwork was on water resources. Their tutor related the fieldwork to the student's experience to help them get the sense of place in the spatial dimension. Through making the field site relatable, the tutor can work through the responses from the student that would have been posted on the forum to mitigate for the lack of interaction with other students. So what does it look like? It's not quite as jazzy as what we had, some of the things we've seen. Here are some of the screenshots of what a second year geography student in a secure environment might receive. We've got the cover to the material on what's my left. We have screenshots from the interactive map drilling down to the specific location, site description, an example of the transcript from one of the Greek interviews on the fieldwork on Greek wildfires from 2015. The image of the screenshots as the start of the video, don't be sort of misled. That's just a screenshot. The video is not accessible to the students. Despite inclusivity, there are issues. As you can see, geography modules use the print rather than the walled garden for the intranet for its fieldwork or for its learning more generally. The materials are printed in black and white, and of course are very two-dimensional. Often the screenshots are distorted. It's like taking a screenshot of Google Earth at each sort of click as the map drills down to the specific site. The wildfires map screen on the screenshots on the previous slide, you probably couldn't see very well. And that was partly deliberate, but it's also sort of realistic to what our students see. But actually the students don't miss out on the content, they just miss out more on the interaction with the intranet and the other students. Our PRIS students benefit the adjustment from inclusivity, for example, from other aspects of inclusivity and meeting requirements and being inclusive, for example, image descriptors. However, these can be minimal. For example, in terms of the wildfires fieldwork, one of the interviewees was on a vineyard and the figure description was vineyard, rather than the detail of how to sort of mitigate for the lack of colour and lack of video and sort of being a little bit more descriptive. Although I gave the example of one of my tutors bringing this field site to life for the student, of course, this is student dependent or tutor dependent, and not all tutors are as sort of interactive and share the passion. And of course, during the pandemic, haven't necessarily been able to actually speak to all of their students. So despite the challenges, even through COVID-19, the approach to our fieldwork learning does work. I mean, it is asynchronous. All of our fieldwork learning is asynchronous. We heard from one of our prison students who was in their cell for 23 hours during the pandemic that their geography fieldwork helped keep them sane. Although in 2D, black and white, the material gave the students something to do and a chance to think about beyond their confined space and to consider the much bigger picture. In geography, we don't have that many students. It's not like this is sort of the lion's share of our students. In an equivalent of a second year module where we have 300 students, it's likely we'll have sort of half a dozen prison students or students in secure environments. These students, despite their challenges, tend to do well with their work. On the second year module, in which I'm the equivalent of the module leader, in the last academic year, most of the prison students reached an overall mark of above 70%. It's not uncommon for our prison students to do really well. Although we may see studying in a secure environment as problematic, OU students see the benefits. They began to have a sense of identity. They become part of a learning community rather than perhaps part of a gang. Their self-esteem increases because they have a new focus and are less likely to reoffend because they, through developing their critical thinking skills, will often see the world differently. They see new horizons. So much so, and just as an aside from geography fieldwork, through OU study, through a number of just moving on to Northern Ireland, of just a sort of an example of how the OU teaches or can make a difference to students in secure environments. During a number of Irish loyalist and Republican prisoners back during the Northern Ireland conflict in both the Maze and Long Quiche prisons, and in fact were instrumental to the Good Friday Agreement, actually met in their education rooms of their prisons. And Noel Quigley, one of the first OU students in Long Quiche, attributes the seeds towards the peace in Northern Ireland coming from the different factions happened to be meeting in the education rooms and be able to starting to see things differently when they were studying their OU modules back in the 1970s. And in fact, Noel was one of the Good Friday peace negotiators. Finally, despite what might be seen as not that exciting in terms of the inclusive materials, the approach works for our geography students in secure environments. And whether it's been through COVID, but particularly through COVID, but more generally, their tenacity is an inspiration.
Excellent, Sonia. Thank you very much indeed. Super. Oh, you can see the claps and things coming up there as well. Wonderful. Sonia, I'm going to ask you maybe hold on to those thoughts. There's a few comments coming in the question area there, but we'll come back to the questions at the end as well. So again, thanks everyone for the comments and the chats that are adding in there as well. We'll move on now to the third talk of this set. Anya Lawrence, I think, is joining us from Birmingham. Anya, are you able to come on? Wonderful, there you are. Hi, Anya. Great to see you. And Catherine, do you have Anya's slides good to go? Are we sort of set there?
This is a pre-recorded presentation, so I'll just get the video up and play it. So never mind, just make sure I've got computer sound on for this.
Absolutely, that's it. So we've got a pre-recorded one for this set, and we'll just play that through in a moment, and then Anya will be able to join us for the questions as well. Thank you, Anya. This looks good.
Can you see that, Anya? Is that okay?
Yeah.
Okay, and then check the sound as well.
I can't hear that.
No, okay. We'll try again. Bear with me just a second. Let's go. Include computer sound, which I did do. Browse and then screen share. Let's try again. Sorry, everybody.
Your website called 6 Simple Steps to Make Fieldwork.
Okay, I'll start it again. Okay, that's on that. Okay.
Hello everyone, my name is Anya, and some of you may have seen a blog post I wrote back in October on the Geoscience for the Future website called 6 Simple Steps to Make Fieldwork More Accessible and Inclusive. Since then, this blog post has transformed into an article which is currently in press for Area Journal. So in my talk today, I'm going to delve a little deeper into this article with you. So to give you a bit of background about me, I'm a PhD student from the University of Birmingham, and I do geochemistry, structural geology and rock magnetics, which basically involves me drilling a lot of rocks. My wonderful co-author Natasha Dowie is a volcanologist, physical geographer and Geoscience for the Future website founder based at Sheffield Hallam University. But before we really start, I thought it's worth asking the question, why am I so interested in diversity and inclusion in fieldwork? Well, in short, it affects me. This is because I do fieldwork. I also have an intersectional identity, being disabled, mixed ethnicity, and LGBTQ+. And I want to use this lived experience to help others like me from minorities. And finally, I just really love doing fieldwork, and I think there's so many simple ways that we could all make fieldwork better. I'm going to explore just 6 of these steps with you today. So first, planning is key. Always have a plan B, C, and D. As just getting out into the field can be really difficult for people with disabilities or those from ethnic, gender, or sexual minorities, it's important that we can make the most of our time in the field and that we aren't held back by things going wrong. For example, lots of the planned activities for field trips are very weather contingent. But if the weather isn't so favourable, it's important to have a variety of backups to do, like virtual work or other indoor activities, so that the trip remains worthwhile and the mood remains positive. Secondly, having fun, not experiencing fear, is imperative. Integral to this is getting the right support, like a close mentor, or for student learners in the field, as a designated member of staff could fulfill this role. And I can't stress enough how empowering having a friendly, familiar face is for vulnerable people. Number 3 is skills over hills. So it's an unfortunate truth that there's an ableist, macho culture that surrounds a lot of fieldwork, and in group situations, this can lead to entire trips becoming about who can climb the highest hill or who can visit the most locations, rather than what it should be about, which is learning and gaining new skills. We need to move away from this exclusionary culture and ensure that nobody misses out on the field experience because of their mobility, fitness, or simply how daring and adventurous they are. Fourth, it's important to remember that one size doesn't fit all. So traditionally, geography, earth and environmental science fieldwork involves spending days or even weeks in the field, which can be really off-putting and inappropriate for some people. We need to be more flexible in this and give people the option of doing shorter trips or even day trips. And on a related note, we shouldn't just assume that fieldwork involves visiting exotic destinations, a trip to the local beach or a museum or a repository all count as fieldwork too. Number 5 is all about embracing diversity and being actively anti-prejudice. And this is basically being more accepting of people's different needs and requirements and remembering that what may seem strange to one person would be completely ordinary for another. This could include anxiety-reducing behaviours like stimming in autistic people such as me, carefully considering dress codes for trans and non-binary people, and taking into account different eating patterns and religious fasting. Overall, we need to be willing to try non-conventional approaches in order to make the field more welcoming and diverse. And last, but by no means least, we must carry on the conversation through conferences like this. We need to maintain the dialogue about ED&I issues and share ideas about best practice long after lockdown and travel restrictions have ended. To effect positive change, we need to include those who have been previously excluded, listen to their stories, and let them lead the conversation going forward. If we don't, we risk losing unique and irreplaceable scientists, not only from the field, but from our disciplines altogether. And now I'm going to briefly share with you how I applied the 6 simple steps to my own PhD fieldwork. So just to set the context, I was sampling some granites in the Northern Highlands of Scotland. I had a target of 100 large rock samples to collect. I had to transport said samples back to the lab at the University of Birmingham. And due to the Scottish weather, I effectively had 2 summers to get this done. So when I was in the planning stages, I knew that I needed support. And it was none other than my mum and dad who gave me unconditional support during my fieldwork, including reassuring me, helping with the transport and all the logistics. And yes, we did encounter torrential rain in Scotland, and yes, we did have wet weather backups, namely going sampling in the drier forest instead during the rain showers, or waiting it out in the car until the sun came back out again. In terms of fun, not fear, I did undertake my fieldwork in a remote, racially homogeneous area where myself and my mum did stand out quite a bit. But by being in a group, we had more safety through strength in numbers, and, as a disability activist Helen Keller suggests, it was much better working together than being alone in this situation. Working with my parents rather than other young people also ensured that skills development was the main priority rather than epic feats of endurance. We had a gentle pace of working with regular coffee breaks, which was really good because it ensured that everyone was energised and hydrated. It also punctuated our field days nicely and gave us a chance to just have a rest and admire the scenery. And what's more, we managed to reach the target of 100 samples, and by the end of it, we all became experts in how to sample rocks for structural geology investigations. So, in terms of one size never fits all, traditionally, dissertation and PhD fieldwork involves 1 to 2 long field sessions, but due to my mom's work commitments, we actually did 4 shorter trips. For me, this was much better than a long trip because it gave me lots of thinking time, so I was able to do very targeted sampling and revisit sites to collect samples if necessary. We also were able to reflect and learn from the mistakes of every trip going on to the next one. With regards to embracing diversity, as well as mum and dad just generally doing their best to accommodate my routines and need for structure, I think this image highlights how our trips were by no means a fashion show. And with carrying on the conversation, well, I think as this conference and all the other presentations that I've made in the past year show, I've never stopped talking about my fieldwork since finishing it. So I've talked a little bit about my personal experiences, but what about the bigger picture? Well, I think the key messages are that we need to move away from the traditional one-size-fits-all approach to fieldwork, as this is simply not appropriate for some people. It'd be much better if fieldwork could be made more bespoke so that different people's requirements can be catered for. This means being willing to try non-conventional approaches and make positive changes so that individuals feel safe, supported and comfortable in the field, and it can maximise their engagement and enjoyment. So just to summarise the 6 simple steps once more for you: planning is key, fun not fear, skills over hills, one size never fits all, embracing diversity and being actively anti-prejudice, and carry on the conversation. Thank you so much for watching. You've been a great audience.
You're back on again. So just to let you know, I'll come back in for the last minute just to let you know when you've got towards your 10 minutes. Okay, is that okay?
Yes.
Over to you.
Good morning, everybody. My presentation focuses on the use of VR applications for training students to field practice and for supporting fieldworks. This project includes many of my colleagues in geology, geomorphology, and astronomy. Why using virtual reality? In fact, virtual reality is an artificial environment in which the user is immersed and can react with this environment. VR gets into our daily life for gaming, but also for professional training, especially in extreme conditions such as a pilot or fireman. But why not using it for applications in geosciences? Indeed, astronomy, geology, geomorphology are sciences of observations. And for geology and geomorphology, field trips are very important for the students. It is the place of learning how to observe, how to collect data, and how to interpret this information. It is also the place to compile skills acquired in the classrooms, but only few field trips are proposed to students per year, and some outcrops are just inaccessible for any human, like extraterrestrial surfaces, seaside cliffs. There's some beautiful outcrops that are in dangerous zones due to conflicts or to security, and even for handicapped person or injured person or overweight person, it is sometimes difficult to access to this outcrop because it needs technical access. Finally, simply, it could be far away from the university campus, and then it's expensive, and it has a carbon footprint. Then many field trips are located near university campus, and then it concerns always the same geological context, for example, and it's a shame for the students. So we would like to build virtual field trips because virtual reality is the best way to fully observe in 3D the objects while preserving the one-to-one scale, which is very important in geology. And you can add numerical metadata onto the reality, which is also something interesting. So I will first show the pedagogical project VirtuaField. And after, I will present some functionalities of the first prototype we received, and I will give you the feedbacks we have done on testing phase. We received the grant from a co-op project, Simulation Applied to Pedagogy in 2019 from Aix-Marseille University to buy computers, headsets, and software. The VirtuaField application is implemented by Ver2Planet, a small startup expert in managing a huge data set in VR application. We received the first prototype of VirtuaField during 2019, but we have also other applications in astronomy, VR2Mars and VR2Curie. It is dedicated to general public, and they propose visits of Mars and Curie comet with ludic activities. I would like to mention that due to the sanitary crisis, many tests were cancelled, and then we obtained less feedbacks than expected. So the first goal of the VirtuaField project is to make possible to any student to discover more outcrops. The goal is to build a library of field cases in a way that the student can autonomously moving inside the 3D scene in solo or in group. You can meet from different locations, different rooms, different towns, and even different countries. And you can visualize pedagogical information integrated by the professors. The second goal is also to train students to field practice, because several colleagues told that generally they have to come back to basic notions before going to the deeper knowledge on the field case. So to facilitate the real field trips, we would like to propose serious games. It could be used for examination and training. The students can training themselves by solving different problems in an autonomous way and individual way, because and generally it's not possible in effective field trips. for security reasons. And the professor can propose a debriefing session in order to be sure that the knowledge are integrated. So about the first prototype of Virtua Field, it is designed around the case study of Lavar-les-Oliviers in the southeast of France. You have two logins, professor and student, in the application, and you have also two modes of visit. The lecture mode, the professor supervises the field trips, all the students are around and they can speak each other, they can react to professor, and they can show geological features, etc. And the professor can, at any time, give a problem to the student and switch to the practicum mode. And in the practicum mode, the students are dispatched in independent scenes. The students can request professor help, and the professor joins in order to help them. Students have a measurement toolbox in order to achieve some measurements and to do observations. We have also MCQ module associated to the prototype. Professors prepare paths of question tags, and the students follow this path. And for each question, they try to answer by using the measurement toolbox. The MCQ module is under construction. It was only tested by the teachers. We have still many questions about the design. For example, do the students follow a predefined path, or do they have to define the more logical way to answer to the different questions? Because, for example, in geology, it is very important to begin to ask questions at a large scale and after to go to the fine scale. So it is a knowledge in itself. So finally, I will give you feedbacks of the first test. Our first concern was to know what are the behavior patterns when the students are faced by the VR applications. What is the accessibility? What is the flexibility? What are the potential issues? To achieve this, we propose a testing phase with surveys over 100 persons from undergraduate to PhD, using the VR2 Theory and the VR2 Mars application. As you can see in the statistics, we met few issues. If persons have vertigo, then they sit down and then it removes the problems. We met one big issue unsolved, a deep correction of glasses. The student cannot follow the experience. And a great surprise, an autistic child who had a great reaction, and he talks a lot about the experience to the teacher, which was unusual, as they said to us. So it was encouraging. The second concern was to test the Virtua Field application. So the first test was on using Virtua Field with just one user over around 30 persons. We have a few issues like before. There are still time of adaptation from a certain person because of material use or comfort, but all the users succeed in performing the requested tasks. And we discover that we lose the notion of time passing during the experience, and so we think to add a clock inside the application. During this experience, it was very interesting because there are 7 students who do a real field trip, and after they do the same within the application, and they learn new things, and they review certain notions. So it means that we can use it for supporting real field trips. And you can see that there's an amazing comment, at least we are not cold. Third, we try to make tests with a group of students, and always it was successful. The person you see here is a student who had auditive issues, and it works with this student, so it was great. The feedback was pain in the neck after 1 hour, 1 hour and a half courses. No eye strain, no headache, some technical issues, but in a summary, it was good. So to conclude, after the test, we see that we met some issues. But the big issues was to exclude some people, and that's why, for example, for deep correction of glasses and uncomfortable feelings, so we would like to propose an interface mixing PC and VR users with a grant from the French Space Agency. We succeed in managing several groups of students, and it's interesting because at the first time we would like to propose to make field trips to many students and to include handicapped persons, injured students and general public. For example, I made a demonstration last week to a retired person. But we also see new use in order to prepare and to review real field trips, and also to have a bird view, something that we cannot have in the reality. And for the future events, we will continue the test. We have voluntary students, and we will integrate into two modules the virtual field application. And we propose at the end of September short courses on virtual field during the Virtual Geoscience Conference. Thank you for your attention. Here is a kind of example of the virtual field software. Thank you.
Great. Sophie, thank you very much indeed, and you can see the applause coming up there as well. So thank you so much for that, and thank you for all of the speakers in this session. I know 4 talks in a row is quite a lot, especially when you're holding on to questions. The chat and thing has been very active, and I've been trying to kind of collate some of the comments and questions and things, but we do have a little bit of time. There is a short window for us to get a few questions before we wrap up. The next session will start at 1:45, folks, and we may well eat into the break time a little bit for that, but it's just to warn you, we'll be beginning again at 1:45. So if you did need a short break, you may need to take that soon, but we will try and make a few time for questions now. So if I could ask the 4 speakers to come back, if you're able to come back on the videos there, that's coming up for us, that's lovely. And then we've got a moment or two for a few questions and things as well. Now, the chat has been very active. I'm not going to pretend that I'm able to cover it all, but I will try and pick out a few of the things as we go through. But if folks do have a question that they would like to ask in person, actually, please just use the little hand icon there or add it into the chat again, just to bring it to my attention. That would be super helpful. I mean, I'm going to try and pick up from a few of the questions. I mean, some of the comments, both Emma and Sophie were both looking at systems there, you know, creating virtual field experiences and things like that. And some of the technologies and the tools that you were using there are maybe bespoke tools or things that you developed specifically for the case. I mean, some of the questions were around to what extent are these approaches suitable for other people, or, you know, what is it a big production? Is the value of the production that's involved in what you've both done is outstanding. It looks really good. What's your sort of feeling around others that maybe will you be able to make these resources available to other people that maybe don't have maybe some of the headsets, Sophie, or, you know, maybe access to the video and any kind of stuff for you. So if I come to you first, Emma, maybe, sorry, and I'll stop talking.
Thank you. Yeah, sorry again about the issues with that presentation. But in regards to production value, interestingly, that's one of the reasons why we actually ended up steering away from virtual reality, mainly due to cost and accessibility with that. So originally, that was my kind of go-to assumption that was the best way to go about it. But then as preliminary research developed, students were more interested in making sure that it was kind of an efficient process. Obviously, it was a learning process too. Even the access across universities, headset only, did prove to have multiple problems. And we found that producing a platform that has interactive elements with 360 that you can use on your phone, but you don't have to require goggles or the actual headset, was a little bit more accessible for not only the wider student kind of audience, but for university and research budgets. So that was the way to keep it accessible whilst making it engaging as developed as we could. But again, there is amazing opportunities with virtual reality, and I think that's not something that's to be discarded.
Yeah. Thank you. And Sophie, could you say a little bit about
that? And for us, it's true that it's a cost at the beginning, because we had to develop the software and also to install all the engines. but after you can really make several students to come to the campus and to use this engine. And as for computer engine, for example, we can lend materials. So, and it's also why we try to mix PC and VR users, because it's to be more accessible to anybody from your computers and from online. Because the interest of the application it's that you can log from your home, for example, and if you are
Just check this. I think your audio may have cut out, or at least I can't hear you at the moment. Does anyone else have that same experience? Oh, okay. Sophie may have been cut off in mid-flow then, unfortunately. Let's move on through with the questions if we dare. If that's apologies, Sophie, if that feels unfair now. But thank you for responding. Other comments and thoughts and things that came up. I mean, does anyone want to ask any other things? I kind of did it on a little bit there around some of the technology. I mean, Sonja, if I come to you and some of the work that you're explaining there around the secure environment, I mean, maybe that's a no particular context, but it's interesting that your comments around the how well the students are doing, and maybe something around their motivation and the opportunities that they have. I guess there's a lot of constraints on what we're able to do. You were mentioning about the education officers and things, and you know, what's your take on some of those roles? Do you find some of that work? It's interesting to, if you had 6 students in the geography, is that something where you could maybe pool those students together to work together as a group, as a tutor group, or that wouldn't be supported? What's the kind of thing there?
No, I mean, I think the teaching students in these environments is interesting. I mean, it's predominantly unique to the OU, but the OU is not the only provider.
Sure.
So I think it's just the OU's been doing it probably longer than any other providers. The difficulty is around restrictions. So it's whether the students, if they happen to be in the same institution and have access to an education room, then there may be some discussion. So therefore, if you've got two students in the same prison, as a tutor, you could have a 3-way dialogue. But effectively, they're all sort of in institutions. They're sort of each institution has its own sort of infrastructure within its sort of confines of what the MA Ministry of Justice expect. And then, of course, there's the restrictions to what they have access to. So, although I know, we do have the walled garden, the secure sort of internet campus, but that's assuming that they've got access to that in the first place. They've got either access to the education room or access to some laptop or device. So it's a very isolating learning experience. And it does rely on sort of the online, the teaching material itself being the distance education material, because obviously it's distance education being sort of informative and inspiring enough to keep the students motivated above and beyond often some of our other education.
Thank you, Sonja. That's good. Okay, I'll maybe come to Anya last as well, if you don't mind. Anya, I mean, thank you so much. The post that you did and the paper that's coming forward, I think a lot of people are quite excited, and you've gathered a lot of interest in the stuff that you've been doing. For some of us that have been involved in looking at trying to make the subjects more accessible and inclusive, your 6 steps distill a lot of really good practical guidance. And so maybe it's not a question. Maybe you're just getting a huge big thanks from the community here, because certainly throughout the talk there was a lot of comments and a lot of reflections on the things that you've done. I mean, the process and from doing that blog through to now, I mean, has it been a pressure? Do you feel a pressure, or do you feel I mean, having you here today, makes a difference to this community, and to hearing your voice and your lived experience will have a bigger effect than a lot of the work that we might do individually. So how you enjoyed it? Is it pressure? Is it okay?
I really enjoyed it. I suppose it's mostly, I suppose, pressure that you put on yourself, really, because you know, I mean, as like it was said earlier, there's kind of like no, you know, kind of obligation to do EDI work, but I just like doing it because I want to really help other people like me and raise awareness that we are here. You know, it's hard for us, and that, you know, if hopefully if conferences like this can keep happening and people can keep coming up with novel ideas and just being willing to try new things, and hopefully we can be included more in these field experiences so that we can enjoy them just as much as everyone else. And they might not be the same as they've always been. They might not be, you know, field work might look completely different to how we expect, but that's all right, because as long as people are given the option and are included, you know, at least they can have the chance to have a go then, and then they can decide for themselves whether it's for them or not. You know, I'm not saying force everybody to go in the field, but if people want to have a go, at least they should be given that chance rather than not being able to even have you know, go at it from the start, but just because they can't be included or they can't access it for whatever reason. So I think that's kind of one of the reasons I've been writing as much as I have and trying to raise awareness of this.
I can't put it in a question form. I just want to thank you for what you're doing, because it makes a difference, and I think it expands the subject, expands all of our subjects. Our definitions of fieldwork should be broadened to so the things that you're writing and things that you're advising us with, yeah, will increase the subject. So I can only thank you. Let's thank all of the speakers. We should wrap up now because we probably are crashing into the next bit of the session. But please use your microphone or use your icons, whatever. But please applaud the presentations that we've just had. Thank you so much, everyone. Thank you. Okay, please.